Look at a dog sleeping in the sunlight right now somewhere in the world. No alarm dragged it awake this morning before its body was ready to move naturally into another exhausting day. Nobody told it what time to wake up, where to be, or how productive it needed to become before sunset arrived. It does not have rent due next week, unread emails waiting somewhere, or quiet panic about whether life is progressing fast enough. It is not replaying an embarrassing conversation from 6 years ago while staring silently at the ceiling in the middle of the night. The animal simply found a warm patch of sunlight and laid down inside it because warmth felt good to its body. Meanwhile, your day probably began with an alarm you personally set because somebody else already decided when your morning starts. You put on clothes following social rules written by people you have never met and will probably never meet personally. Then you spent most of your waking hours doing something another human decided was economically valuable enough to deserve payment. And somewhere quietly underneath all of this sits an anxiety almost impossible to completely turn off inside the modern human mind. The anxiety that maybe you are not doing enough, not moving fast enough, or somehow falling behind everyone else around you constantly. Even though nobody officially explained where this race begins, where it ends, or what winning is even supposed to look like. Which leads naturally to a question that sounds childish at first, until you think about it for longer than 30 seconds. Seriously. Are animals actually more free than humans? On the surface, the answer feels obviously yes. A lion has never filed taxes or worried about maintaining a professional image during an awkward conversation with strangers somewhere online. A sparrow does not need permission slips, permits, licenses, passwords, or government approval before building a nest somewhere in a tree. An elephant has never attended a meeting that realistically could have been explained completely inside a 3-sentence email instead. Animals have no dress codes, no deadlines, no resumes, no career ladders, and no invisible pressure to constantly optimize themselves endlessly. They live almost entirely inside the present tense. They eat when hungry, sleep when tired, move when restless, and stop moving whenever their bodies naturally decide enough is enough. Nobody built a financial system designed to extract value from their labor before allowing them access to food or shelter afterward. Nobody convinced them their value as living creatures depends entirely on productivity, status, or how efficiently they monetize their time daily. The 18th century philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau spent years arguing civilization itself may actually be the problem humans created accidentally together. In his Discourse on Inequality, published in 1755, Rousseau imagined what human life looked like before organized civilization fully emerged historically. Before governments, before private property, before hierarchy, before laws, and before humans constantly performed existence for other people's approval socially. Rousseau called this original condition natural liberty, the freedom to live according only to immediate needs and personal survival. No boss, no debt, no social performance, no explaining your existence to strangers demanding proof that your life deserves legitimacy somehow. Then agriculture appeared, then ownership, then institutions, then governments, and eventually entire systems humans could no longer easily escape afterward. Humans traded natural liberty for something Rousseau called civil liberty instead. The freedom to live inside rules in exchange for protection from everybody else trying to survive within the same environment simultaneously. You gave up the freedom to simply exist naturally and received the right to exist inside a structured system in return. Animals never signed that contract because animals never built the systems requiring the contract to exist in the first place historically. They kept the original arrangement while humans slowly buried themselves beneath layers of obligation accumulating across generations of civilization and technological development. And honestly, the evidence surrounding modern life makes Rousseau's argument feel disturbingly difficult to dismiss completely once you really notice it. You cannot sleep whenever tired because your schedule decides when exhaustion is allowed to matter physically inside modern economic life today. You cannot simply stop working when mentally overwhelmed because survival itself now depends on maintaining access to money consistently over time. You cannot always leave harmful environments immediately because leaving often requires financial stability humans rarely possess comfortably in dangerous moments emotionally. Every basic human need, including food, shelter, rest, healthcare, and connection, became something modern humans must somehow continuously earn first. The animal simply finds these things directly inside the world itself without invoices, contracts, applications, passwords, subscriptions, or monthly payment reminders attached. There is a line written by Jorge Luis Borges that stays with people long after reading it for the very first time. Borges wrote that with the exception of mankind, all creatures are immortal because they know nothing about death conceptually or philosophically. Not literally immortal, of course, but psychologically untouched by the kind of existential terror haunting human consciousness constantly beneath ordinary daily life. The animal responds to immediate danger with immediate fear, but once the danger disappears, the fear disappears completely alongside it afterward. It does not lie awake imagining hypothetical futures or replaying possible disasters repeatedly inside its mind before eventually falling asleep exhausted mentally. Humans invented existential dread, and no other species appears burdened by it in remotely the same psychologically devastating way consistently. We are the only creatures capable of torturing ourselves emotionally using futures that have not happened and may never happen at all. The dog sleeping peacefully in the sunlight is not wondering whether its existence ultimately means anything within the larger structure of reality. It found warmth, safety, and comfort for the moment, and somehow that became completely sufficient for the animal emotionally and psychologically. Kierkegaard believed humans lost that simplicity forever once self-awareness fully awakened inside the human mind, historically and psychologically. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote that true awareness creates two experiences simultaneously inside conscious human beings trying to understand existence honestly. Weigh at being alive at all inside an unimaginably vast universe, and dread about everything connected inevitably to existing consciously over time. Animals appear to experience the awe without carrying the dread constantly alongside it every moment of every ordinary day, psychologically speaking. They exist without becoming self-conscious about existing, and honestly, that sounds remarkably close to the purest version of freedom imaginable emotionally. But before envying animals too quickly, there is another side to this story most people never really think about deeply enough. Because the freedom animals possess is not necessarily the version humans imagine while watching them peacefully existing somewhere inside untouched natural environments. A wildebeest running desperately away from a lion is not choosing to run after carefully evaluating philosophical alternatives thoughtfully beforehand. Fear activates automatically, muscles respond automatically, and the animal runs because instinct leaves absolutely no meaningful alternative available biologically whatsoever. The animal cannot decide today it would rather face the lion calmly instead of escaping danger through automatic survival mechanisms immediately afterward. It cannot choose contemplation over vigilance or consciously reject the instinct's evolution programmed deeply into its nervous system over millions of years. Its freedom from laws came at the cost of being governed almost entirely by biological programming, without meaningful resistance or conscious rebellion possible. Animals follow no written laws because instinct already controls behavior, so effectively external legal systems become largely unnecessary for survival and reproduction naturally. Rousseau noticed this too and argued animals obey nature automatically through sensation, while humans possess the terrifying ability to resist impulses consciously. Humans feel hunger, fear, anger, lust, exhaustion, jealousy, and survival instinct just like every other creature alive anywhere on Earth today. But humans can sometimes choose actions directly opposing those instincts, despite every biological system demanding something entirely different emotionally and physically. A human being can forgive somebody, even while every emotional impulse screams for revenge loudly somewhere inside the nervous system afterward. A person can stay in dangerous situations while instinct begs them desperately to run immediately as fast and far away possible. Humans can sacrifice comfort, safety, pleasure, survival, and even life itself for abstract ideas existing only inside the conscious imagination mentally. No animal appears capable of choosing a life fundamentally contradicting its biological programming in the same extreme way humans occasionally can. Which means humans may possess one kind of freedom animals never truly experience themselves. The freedom to resist our own nature consciously even when doing so creates enormous suffering emotionally, psychologically, and physically over time. Whether humans actually use that freedom wisely is another question entirely, but the capacity itself seems uniquely human among living creatures. Then modern neuroscience complicated the entire discussion even further in ways philosophers centuries ago could never possibly have predicted scientifically. Stanford neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky spent decades studying baboons living freely in the Serengeti far away from modern civilization and institutions entirely. And what he discovered shattered the comforting fantasy that wild animals live carefree lives untouched by stress, anxiety, or social pressure completely. Baboons experience chronic stress responses remarkably similar to humans, including elevated cortisol levels and measurable physical damage tied directly to social hierarchy. Dominant baboons psychologically pressure weaker baboons, while lower-ranking animals carry the biological consequences inside their bodies over long periods afterward. No taxes, no mortgages, no performance reviews, yet still grinding themselves down emotionally over status, hierarchy, competition, and social positioning constantly. The social anxiety did not begin with civilization because parts of it already existed long before humans built a single institution historically. Civilization did not invent stress completely. Humans simply industrialized it. Wild animals also exist with absolutely no protective barrier, standing between themselves and reality whenever something catastrophic suddenly happens unexpectedly in nature. No hospitals, no painkillers, no emergency surgery, no antibiotics, and no systems designed specifically to soften suffering after serious injuries occur physically. When something goes wrong in the wild, it often goes completely wrong alone, without mercy, protection, or meaningful second chances afterward available. The freedom from civilization's rules is also freedom from nearly everything civilization, created to stop painful deaths from ordinary accidents, medically speaking. But humans also created another disturbing contradiction. Most people rarely confront honestly while talking romantically about freedom and the natural world emotionally. We take freedom away from animals constantly while simultaneously envying the freedom we imagine they possess naturally somewhere beyond civilization itself. Humans build zoos and call them conservation, while placing creatures evolved for enormous migrations into carefully controlled concrete environments permanently afterward. Animals evolved across millions of years to roam, hunt, migrate, and explore territories larger than entire modern cities, combined geographically speaking. Then humans reduced those environments into enclosed spaces small enough for weekend visitors carrying cameras and overpriced drinks to casually observe comfortably. Scientists studying captive animals eventually documented a deeply disturbing psychological phenomenon, now commonly referred to as zoochosis, medically and behaviorally. Polar bears pace identical routes endlessly while elephants sway back and forth for hours inside environments their brains never evolved to tolerate naturally. Primates sometimes pull out their own fur repeatedly, while trapped inside spaces incapable of satisfying deeply rooted behavioral instincts psychologically over time. These are not random habits, but visible signs of psychological collapse occurring inside minds fundamentally incompatible with long-term confinement emotionally and biologically. The freest creatures humans can imagine psychologically breaking apart. Inside cages, humans personally designed and continue maintaining economically for entertainment and tourism. And beyond captivity, humans transformed billions of animals into products existing almost entirely inside systems built purely around efficiency and convenience economically. Roughly 80 billion land animals are killed for food every year through industrial systems operating at scales almost impossible for human minds visualize emotionally. Many of those animals never once experience anything remotely resembling freedom according to the conditions their species originally evolved within naturally. So who is actually more free here? The animal living without self-awareness or the human painfully conscious of every invisible cage surrounding existence? Maybe freedom was never one thing because animals possess freedom from existential dread, while humans possess freedom to question existence itself consciously. And maybe the real burden of being human is becoming the only creature intelligent enough to notice the cage even when nobody else can see it.